So fly casting. So I have to tell you the story about how I got into learning how to do more casting because it's funny. My first fly fishing experience was like 35 years ago. And I think I wrote an article about that, hooking myself in the back multiple times on the Hudson River. So, learning how to cast, I went to and joined my local club down in the Sacramento area, and I took a 2-day, learn how to fly fish 101 class with casting. And that was the only instruction that I ever had for my first 30 years of fly fishing. And I taught myself how to cast. And I felt pretty good about it because, hey, I could cast 70 feet. I must be a pretty good caster. So Dwight comes down here 6 years ago and tells the club about this new thing that the FFI is doing with the bronze, silver, and gold level casting recognition awards. So I was like, well, that's really cool. So I went home and I went on the internet, the FFI website, and I looked up the criteria for the recognition awards. I'm like, wow, the gold awards, you can do this, and I can do all those kinds of things. So I went down to a little further. Okay. Right there. Is that good? Okay. So I went down to a gravel bar where Dwight said he was at, and I said, hey, Dwight, I didn't know his name at the time. Hi, I want to test for this gold level. He's like, well, I'd love to do that, but you have to test for the bronze first. And then you have to test for the silver and you can test for the gold. I was like, okay. He put me through the bronze test and I couldn't roll cast 35 feet. And so I taught myself to roll cast and I did a terrible job at it. I just, I taught myself and I just didn't do a very good job. So I started working with Dwight, pretty much every Saturday down there. And it took me, I think 2 months to get my roll cast to just be enough for 35 feet. And I think it took me 6 months to be able to get the silver award and 2 years to get the gold award. Working with him regularly. It was after about a year of working with him that I decided to go for the casting instructor certification. And it took me, from when I started working with him, it took me 4.5, 5 years till I got to that point. When I worked on it seriously, it took 3 years. And one of the things that allowed me to become a better caster was to understand the cast. And I started writing about it a little bit. And when you write about something, you learn more and you understand it better. I've been working on, for example, my roll cast for the last 6 months. I mean, finally, I understand it. And now I can roll cast 55 feet because I understand the cast. And I understand the mechanics of it. So, and part of what I did was I used a coaching program to become a casting instructor. There's a coaching program called OnForm. And it's mostly used for golf, sometimes for baseball. But I had taken a class given at the FFI National about using this program. So I bought it and I bought an iPad and tripod and set it up and filmed myself casting. And it was absolutely key to my steps to become a casting instructor, to be able to watch my cast and recognize what I was doing wrong, go out and change my cast, to come back and film myself again. And now I'm using it in my teaching as well. And I'm using it to put together this talk so people can understand these things. So when we teach, when we learn how to teach casting, one of the things that the instructors learn is the 5 essentials of casting. And so this talk is put together to explain the 5 essentials of casting using this OnForm program to show doing it right and doing it wrong, and then analyzing the cast. And I just think it's cool, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So we have a casting club, River's Best Casting Club, that we started this last summer. And so we're sort of sponsoring this. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Let me grab this. Might have to use this. There we go. So why is casting important? Lefty Cray, of all the factors involved in fly fishing, none is so as important as the ability to cast. The better one can cast, the more likely the success in fly fishing, certainly the greater the pleasure. That's certainly been my experience. If I think about, my favorite fish of all time, and I can even remember these particular fish, most of my favorite fish were the ones that I caught with a really awesome cast. It didn't even have to be caught. It can be just hooked. So, putting the cast out there, making this great cast, and then having the fish take it, to me, that really gets me going. So I think that's important. So, you don't need to have a lot of strength to be an excellent caster. You need coordination, you need timing. Joan Wolfe, absolutely famous as a woman. She beat all men in 1951 to become the national championship. She did some records, not a lot of strength, great coordination. And my favorite, Maxine McCormick, she was at the expo a couple of years ago. I have her. Did a fan thing on her. I then have her sign my vlog too. But I just think she's awesome. 12 years old, and she wins a world championship. 12 years old, and more recently, she had some record scores in distance and accuracy casting. She beat all the men, record for men and women. So just amazing caster. She's just so consistent, and no strength involved. This is all coordination and timing. So this is a program that shows a master caster and what the ideal casting would look like. Marco Boretti, I think his name is. How do I get this started? Yep. Should do it. Yeah. How do I get it to start? Maybe the question. Here we go. So how narrow they are and how flat the top of the loop is. This is what our goal is. So his elbow is going up in the back, casted down in the forward casting. I haven't cast that good yet. That's master level casting. I am working on it. Isn't it beautiful? Sometimes I'm out there casting and I'm not even that good. I have people come up and tell me how much they enjoy just sort of watching it. So the whole point of that was to see these loops. So loops allow us to get a fly that weighs absolutely nothing and to get it out there because our line has the weight that's pulling out there. And a loop is the most efficient way to propel that line and get that fly out there. So components of a loop. The bottom component is the rod leg. The nose unrolls as it's coming around, and the top component is the fly leg. And the way you evaluate whether it's a good loop or bad loop is basically, is that fly leg straight or not? And both of these are considered good loops. The one on the left is we call a trailing loop. You notice that it comes below the rod leg and it just keeps going down. It doesn't come back up. It's flat. The upper one is the more traditional loop above. You can have, you may need a narrow loop for some situations. You may want a wide loop for other situations. And as long as that top leg is flat, it's gonna be efficient and it's gonna be desirable. One of the things that we want to make sure is, you don't tangle your line up. So if you have a flat leg here, you're not going to tangle your fly, and it's going to be aerodynamic. So how do we make the top leg straight? Well, this is all about tip path. If the tip of our rod goes in a straight line, the fly line is going to go in a straight line. It's all physics. This is all levers and physics. So what we need to do is when we're loading a rod and the rod bends, we want it to drop in a certain way so that taking into account the bend in the line, we still end up with a straight fly leg, straight tip path. So this is our undesirable domed loop. We see this a lot in people who go too far when they cast, where they break their wrist on the back cast. So domed loops don't go anywhere. So I don't know if you guys know, I like to fish down there at down in Tahoe. Pyramid, thank you. My mind went blank. I like to fish Pyramid Lake, and that's where you're doing ladder fishing. People are all sitting next to each other, and you got a long line of ladders, and you're trying to cast as far as you can out there, and then you wait and you retrieve it. So I was out there, and doing my little loops, and I'm getting my 70-foot cast, and the guy's next to me, he's like, "How do you do that?" And he's like, "How are you doing?" Start back in the back of the ladder, come up, and it's not going anywhere. He didn't have a loop, and I couldn't teach it to him. While he was doing, he just didn't understand. But if you're doing this big old thing here, you're going to put the dome, it just doesn't go anywhere. So how do you end up dumbing? Well, that's a convex tip path. My tip is starting here, it's coming up, it's coming back down. The height difference between here and here ends up the size of our loop. So if I'm going from here to here, it's how big your loop is. It's all physics. And then there's a second undesirable loop, a tailing loop. This is the one that causes the wind knots. It's not a wind knot, it's a casting knot. Okay, you'll notice that the fly leg is dipping below and then coming back above. It goes below, comes down, it's trailing loop, that's fine. Tailing loop gets everything tangled up. And that's caused by a concave tip path. And so you see that this is usually caused by shocking of the rod. We've got somebody here who starts with heavy early, and the tip dips, comes back up again, a tailing loop. So that would be like this. And all sorts of tangles with that. So that's another undesirable thing, result that we don't want. So the 5 essentials, the first one we just went over, straight line tip path. This is our goal. We have 4 other essentials that we use to keep in mind to try to achieve the straight line tip path. And here's what I wanted to use to sort of analyze the examples that I'm giving, the sports program, OnForm program here. This is what the screen looks like when you're editing. OnForm, we can create a video and we can comment on it. We can maintain a library that can be shared with I have a sort of a list of students theoretically that can get into my library and look at what I've made. Vary playback speed, including stopping at 1-second intervals. You'll see examples of that. Draw lines, measure angles and sizes, link 2 videos side by side for comparison. You can even overlap them and create 2-way conversations between students. Yes? The question is, do I have to have a tripod to do that? If you have somebody that's really good at holding still, you can, but yes, I have a camera tripod. And then I have an iPad, and then I have a framework that's meant for either holding or mounting on a tripod. And when I film myself, I use that. So yeah, it's very helpful to do that. So here's a video analysis about using the OnForm to analyze tip path. So what I did was I took that video and I marked the beginning of the forward cast with that. Mark the end of the forward cast. Draw a line between them. And now we're going to keep going and watch how the tip of his fly rod pretty much follows a straight line. It might be slightly below, it might be slightly above. You see how he makes his cast follow? You see how it goes straight? It's just beautiful. That's what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so this is Marv. He's one of our casting instructor candidates. He's been working on it. I asked Marv to do some crappy casting here so I could film it. This is not an example of our terrible teaching. Okay, so now we're looking at convex tip path, breaking the wrist and his line going back. And so here we show it with the video analysis at the beginning of his back cast. Mark that. There's the top of the rod at the top of the back cast. And there we go at the back side. So basically you can see that tip path creates the big old dome loop that's pretty much the same height. A little hard to see with the trees in the background. His line's going way up there. Yeah, it's a fly line. That's where it ended up. That's just not going to propel anything anywhere. So, straight line tip path. How am I supposed to watch the tip of my rod while I'm casting? Well, you really can't very easily, and you don't need to. And the reason is that if you watch the top of your cork, or some people would say your thumb, if you watch the path of the top of the cork, it pretty much details the tip of the rod. And so that's a really good way to know how you're doing with that. So here's an example using Marco's tape. Full speed. That's what his casting was looking like. Now I'm going to go back and do it again. I'm going to mark where his cork is, beginning of the back cast right there. And mark that spot. Here's where he stops his back cast. Starting his forward cast. That's where he stopped his forward cast. We got another straight line there. And that was starting the third back cast. Now I restarted it and running the video with those lines in place so that you can watch how his cork follows those paths. Beautiful straight. So if you monitor the top of the cork and you can watch it while you're casting and just watch that spot, you can do a pretty good job of just seeing how things are working. Now, one of the things I had to do to achieve the gold status in my casting journey and then later to become a casting instructor is I had to fix my back cast. My back cast had this huge old big loop. And what Dwight recommended that I do was to work with relearning muscle memory with this exercise here. So I'll show it to you. So I got this PVC pipe that Dwight had me get to practice my two-handed casting. And I would sit and work on my laptop, and I'd take a break and I would set up the PVC pipe, and I would run my rod here with the cork on the along the PVC pipe, and I'll show it to you here. I'll run the tape to show you how I filmed and how I did that. With it, let me finish this and I'll show that to you. So what I did before. So the question was, how did I decide? First question was, how did I decide to do the angle of the PVC pipe? And the second question was, what was happening to my cast before I started working on this exercise? So what I had been doing with my casting is I had been coming back and then circling up like this. And if you look at the path of the top of the cork, coming back like this and coming around, you end up with this big old back cast. So what you want to do as far as determining your angle, you do your lift, you have the beginning of where you do your back cast about the same place that you would end up your forward cast, so about right here. Then you come to what's called the key position right here. So what I want to do is to start my cast and then run the top of the cork. So I end up with my key position right here. And so I set up the PVC pipe in that position. I sort of hold it and fiddle around with it. So it end up with my back cast here. And then the forward cast, I do the same thing, but it would be a slightly different angle, key position, bring it down to the stop here. And I would just do this over and over. It took me 2 or 3 months of doing this, and I fixed it. Yes. I held it with one hand. So I held it, you can do it that way. A lot of people, what they do is they'll take a piece of tape and run a piece of blue tape along a cabinet or a wall and just go next to it and just run your thumb along it. So you can do that without having to do, I like to feel the feedback of the cork running along the pipe to tell me I'm doing it wrong. When I'm teaching, sometimes what I do is I'll get my fly line and I'll hold it up to a student and run it along the cork and have them try to bring the top of the cork without pushing the fly line up or down when they're actually doing this exercise. So to me, that was a really important part of my understanding my cast to change my cast to do it that way. Any other questions? Okay. So the next step after our goal is straight line tip path, eliminate slack. So we're talking about what are our steps of doing our cast. If you start your cast with slack, you can't recover from it. So that's why I put it as the next most important thing to talk about. Slack is evil. I think I wrote an article that said slack is evil. The rod cannot load until the fly line is straight. Slack will shorten your casting stroke, and maintaining a straight line tip path will be difficult. Eliminate slack by stripping the line and performing roll cast. That applies to the beginning of your cast. If you're doing a pickup lay down, you want to end up with your tip down to start the cast. What I find a lot of people do wrong is they do their cast and they stop here and then they drop the rod after it's all stopped and you've introduced slack. So the whole idea, for example, of doing a cast is you follow it down. So you're starting with your tip down here, you've got no slack. You immediately can load your rod. And then there's slack on your back cast too. If you do your back cast and you come forward too soon, you've got slack on your forward cast because your back cast isn't straight. And I'll show you an example of that. So this is Jack. He's came down with a gravel ball, and this is his second lesson, and he ended up having a big slack problem. So we spent a lot of time trying to understand the idea of slack. And then after we sort of got some, I said, "Can I follow on doing this?" And first, I want you to screw it up, and then I want you to do it better. So this is how it came out. So I asked him to introduce the slack by tossing it down. That. So we dropped it down. Now, once the load, you can tell by the bend in the rod. So this is slow down. Not much bend in the rod. It's starting to come off the water. You can see that white water. Not much bend, not much bend. Now we're starting to get some loading going here. Well, actually, not much bend there either. Still coming off the water. There we go. Now that rod is starting to bend. So we'll count that as where your back cast is really starting to load, and it's pretty much right there. So you don't have much room to put your cast in there. And I'm actually measuring the angle for that. He did a good stop on his back cast. That's a nice high stop, but he started it too late because of the slacks. 40 degrees worth of time trying to do that. Notice the fly line coming up here. His fly line still hasn't passed him. He's starting his forward casting. And so we've definitely got slack going on the forward cast. Now, so you'll see that he's got very little loading. It's of his rod until about there. That's where he's starting to get some loading in his rod. He's stopping low. He still only has 40 degrees of length to try to get that cast in. And wow, what a beautiful example of a tailoring loop. I've never done that. No one's ever done that here. Sure, the question was your question. The question was, he's left-handed. So the question is, can everyone do left arm and right arm the same? Not too many people are ambidextrous. I have actually been working on my left arm this last year because of an injury. I've been doing both hands. And the interesting thing about it is I'm not too bad at casting with my left hand, but I cannot haul with my right hand. I just can't do it. I'm getting there, but I've been working on it for a while. Okay, so now this one is Jack actually asking him to show us how much better he is after my lesson. So you notice that he much better on the forward, on the back cast, but the forward cast still was poor timing. So we'll analyze that here. You notice that the line is going straight out, and you can see it coming off the water. We're already getting some nice load. See how nicely his rod is bent right there. We've got it, the rod loading there. Stop behind his back cast. That was actually a nice loop that he gave. He's got 79 degrees in order to do that casting stroke. Still timing it too early. The fly line still hasn't passed and he's coming forward. So that's the next lesson. Timing for when start the forward stroke. So slack on the no slack on the back cast, still the slack on the forward cast because of not timing that correctly and starting that stroke. So perfect segue into the next essential, which is timing. So once you eliminate the slack, you want to time that for changing directions of your cast. So when do you change your cast? Let's say we start the back cast. We can't really see it as easily. So when do we start it? So we talk about the nose of your loop. And you see where the red on the top one is transitioning to the gray. The gray is my diagram for the leader. And where the red transitions to gray is your what we call a nail knot or a loop if you have a loop-to-loop connection. So the ideal timing is this loop is unrolling and as that nail knot is starting to come around the nose and come around the other way. That's when you want to start changing the other direction. So the second one is too early, which is what Jack was doing. Got slack in the system. And if you wait too long, it basically drops behind you and catches on stuff. So that's how we want to time it. And so how do you time it? It depends on how much fly line you have. If you don't have much fly line, you're doing quick strokes. You put more line out. You have to wait for the loop to unroll. So you pause longer. So the mnemonic that we say is long line, long pause, short line, shorter pause. And you have to play around with it. So you either can look and see, where's my loop with unrolling, and I'm getting to the point that I can feel the slack and the tension in my hand, so that when it's ready, I feel a little tightness in my hand. I know that I need to change the direction. So an instructor can help you out with that kind of thing, to try to figure out when to change directions on your cast. So I wanted to play this again with the idea of you can't really see the whole loop, but you can sort of imagine where it would be. So watch his casting again with the idea of when he changes the direction on his cast. He's letting it starting to drop a little bit, which is one of the reasons he has a trailing loop, which is fine. It's not hitting the water or anything like that. So the next one we talk about is casting arc. And the whole idea about that is, if you don't have much line, you don't have to cast very far with your casting arc. If I have small amount of line, I'll do short little arc. And you notice where my tip of my rod is going from here to here. If I have a lot of line, my arc is going to be further. Okay, and I have a demo for that as well. So if you're going faster, you're going to have a wider arc because you're going to put more load in there. If you've got longer line, you're going to have a wider arc. The opposite for shorter. The casting arc, there's been some changes in the definitions. Some people say it's the angle of your casting from here to here, and some people say it's the length of the tip path. That was the old definition, which I prefer. How long, how many centimeters or inches is from here to here with the casting stroke. So this is Jonathan. He's a Master Level Casting Instructor. And I asked him to do a demonstration, and what he's going to do is cast 30 feet of line. We've got markings on our line when we're practicing for instruction. 5 casts, false casts at 30 feet, slip line to 40, 5 casts, slip line to 50, 5 casts. So I'll let you watch him do that. Pay attention to his timing and his casting stroke. It's on the line, marker lines. So he just slipped to 40 feet right there. And he's looking at his line. We all mark our lines. So now he's slipping line. He's going to go to 50 feet. I mark it where my reel is. Yeah. I mark it just beyond my reel. So this is restarting the video. This is 30 feet of line, and I'm marking his casting arc with the beginning of the forward cast, ending the forward cast. And I have 85 degrees there for 30 feet. I move forward to 40 feet, marking where he's starting his stroke. and where he's ending it. So I have 97 for 40 feet of line. Now we moved ahead to 50 feet. It is not easy to carry 50 feet of line. That's a master level casting. To do it without hauling. So that's how I'd used OnForm to demonstrate that. And so that's what we measured. And that's about right. Yes. Well, it does matter. When we're casting, we want our and there's different styles of casting, and we call ourselves the elbow droppers because that's our style. You want to start at your key position here. And the way we teach is to drop the elbow first, extend the elbow, and then wrist. So to create a straight line, that's my linkages, we would call it. So Jack was going way too high. Yeah, he was going too high. We want our upper arm to be parallel to the ground. This would be horizontal with our key position. And then dropping the elbow is the first part of our casting stroke that we teach. Does that answer your question? Okay. So application of power. This is the most difficult thing to learn, I think, to go between intermediate and advanced caster is to smooth out the application of power. If it's not smooth, that's where you toss out those, your tailing loops and stuff like that. So see some examples of that. So what we want is we want to apply our power smoothly. We want it to progressively increase. And the more power you put into the rod, the more the bend is. You can measure it that way. Maximum power should be at the end of the stroke. And your stop needs to be somewhat controlled. You'll see that the stop on that one, I've got it diagrammed as the most bend in the rod. Stop, it's straightened out, and then there's a counterflex. And you'll see that the bottom part of the rod isn't moving at all. And that's a nice stop right there, diagrammed. So I should put myself in here. So this is roll cast. When I finally figured out my roll cast, it's not this particular example is a few months ago. I've gotten even better since then. So look at the bend of the rod. You see dropping the elbow there. The line is beside me. It's coming in front of me and coming around like this. That would be a roll cast. Your line would be in front of you for my D loop. So dropping the elbow. We're getting a little bit of bend in the rod. We're getting, you'll see it coming off the ground there. More of a bend. And there's my stop. It's pretty good bend. There's the direct stop. And there's the counterflex. And you'll notice that the bottom third of the rod didn't move hardly at all between those three frames. And yes, roll cast done correctly have a loop. Now I've got that little funny thing in there afterwards I'm trying to get rid of. I'm getting better at it. But yeah, you'll see the bend in the rod. That's a 9-foot rod. And so that's a pickup laydown trying to show the same thing. So that was the loop that I created with the pickup laydown. Now we're going to slow it down. There's my lift. Now I'm starting to accelerate there. You'll see me bending the rod. And there's a stop right there. Unfortunately, I let it drift a little bit right there. I'm trying to get rid of that. Forward cast. I'm at my loops. And the different things I'll look at while I'm practicing and casting. That time I'm looking at my loops. Other time I'll look at the top of the cork. Other times I'll look at the angle of the wrist, and I'll show that a little bit more there. So pretty decent loop. Same thing. And you'll see how I'm following the line down as the line's coming down. Now I did a video. Hey, Linda, this is her second lesson with a student. And so I got her permission to show that. And this is one of the side-by-side demonstrations that I mentioned. So we're looking at Linda was applying power initially. And you'll see she's starting to get some bend in the rod there. A lot of bend right there. And then she loses it. The rod is straightened out all the way, and so she's not going to be able to throw that line back there. It's because of power. You want to progressively increase power or increase speed. And I did a side by side here to compare it. You'll see how my power was delayed in that stroke compared to hers. Do you see that? You want me to do that again? Okay. It sort of seems to have to load sometimes. Okay, let's try it again. Let's see if I can move it forward here a little bit. I could on my laptop, but I can't on this one as much. Yeah. So for the people out there, Linda was saying this is how helpful this was for her to see it and see that what she's actually doing is, as opposed to what she thinks she's doing. Okay, so here we go with my pickup laydown, delay, 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 and the power is and speed comes at the end. Pause, power speed comes at the end, stop, and then following the line down. Wish I could skip sort of more forward on this. I'm not sure how to do that. I'm getting better. As I'm getting better, I'm feeling the rod load. It used to be that I would just do it on timing, and I discovered and I was informed by my fellow instructors that I was creeping forward a little bit and losing some of my power. So now I'm sort of waiting until I feel a tension in my hand on my back cast. Do that, my loops are so much better. I don't do it all the time now. I'm still working on that. So here I go with Linda. You'll watch her back cast loads, slows down and unloads before she gets to her stop. You want to have the maximum bend of your rod pretty much right around when you're going to stop. She's loading too early. She's loading right here. That's her maximum bend is right there. It's not very bent, which is why her cast isn't going to go very far. And she's unloaded and slowed down and lost it. You want to progressively increase your speed and increase your load during the cast. And so she, like I said, she's got a straight rod and she's lost it. So compare her timing to mine as far as where the speed is. Tell the difference? Yeah. Very important point you said is when you start feeling, you can feel where in the rod the load is and get more power. That's an advanced concept and it's very, very important. Most of your power comes when you can load the lower part of your rod as opposed to the middle or tip. And it has to do with the direction of your cast. You'll notice I start my cast with my rod coming down in this sort of direction here, as opposed to moving the rod this way. Moving the rod right away this way, you're not loading very deep. If you start off this way, you load deep in the rod and you get more power. It has to do with the direction of how you start your cast. And by dropping your elbow, you manage to do it with a deeper load. So common casting errors, opening the wrist on the back cast. Probably the most common thing that we see people do, they just sort of let it go instead of stopping it here. And that creates a domed loop because your arc is too far back. How do you fix that? Going to go through some common, and we'll do examples. This is me asking Marv again to do a crappy cast. So to show an example of that. Still loading right now. I picked on him. He was there. I had the camera. I was like, please do a crappy cast. And then I wanted to film his casting to give him a hand. And I actually have an example that I'm going to show you later. So here's him breaking his wrist on the cast. We see that all the time. That's one of the most common things that we see. So how do you keep from doing that? Well, the most important thing that you can do is look at the angle between the butt of the rod and your wrist. If you break your wrist on the back cast, that opens up. So what I do is I either have my students watch that, and instead of looking up there at my loops, I'll be doing it. And I've done this when I was working in my CI. Just work on staring at this during my cast so that I don't break it. Right now I'm working on my forward cast, not opening that up. The other thing that you can do is put your fingers in there. Put your cast here, under here, and feel that you're not losing the pressure. And so that's sort of a proprioceptive feedback, a sort of a pressure sensing feedback. A lot of people do better with that. You should have 3 fingers in there at the end of your back cast, 2 fingers at the end of your forward cast. That's how I like to do it. So either watching it or feeling that. Another common error, excessive elbow extension. Instead of stopping here, having people do that, stopping your rod too far down, same thing. Domed loop, this would be on the forward cast as opposed to the back cast. And you'll see how the cork has got that arc to it instead of being a straight line path. So I picked on Marv again for this one. Yep. So you see that all the time with beginners. We talk about clocks with, stop at 1 o'clock and 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. I like to think about it that way. Stopping here on your back cast, stopping here on your forward cast, and it may be a little further with more line, but when you do that, you just got this big old loop. So excessive elbow extension is one of the most common ways that people try to, get that line out there by, like that guy on the Pyramid Lake. So this is actually excerpts from the video that I taped that I made from Marv, who analyzed his cast to help him and Dwight understand where he was having problems. And this ended up being a 3.5 minute video with commentary. And I did some clips from it for this particular talk about his stop here. Dwight says that Marv has a California stop. So it's kind of subtle. You can't hear the tape, it's not coming up in the presentation. But my example next to his, watch where my stop is and watch where the lower part of my rod is between the beginning of my stop, the middle of my stop, where the rod is straight. And those are eighth section intervals. And you see that lower part of the rod is just not moving. So a controlled but firm stop right there. And now I put that next to my stop and show the video analysis of that. It was hard to tie where his stop is. I sort of had to decide where his rod straightened out. So there's where it's California stop. So there's the next eighth second, and he's down here. Next eighth second, the rod has traveled further. And the next eighth second, his rod has traveled further. So yeah, that's our California stop. Yeah, it's a roll through. Yeah, so that's the problem he has with this cast. He's a very good caster, but he needs to get rid of that to get to the next level. So he had to see it to understand where the problem was. Yeah. Another error, excessive elbow extension, poor stop. Same thing we just talked about, a common error. What you want to do to fix that poor stop is, once again, you start at the key position and to start with dropping the elbow rather than straightening the elbow. So by dropping the elbow and then straightening as I get further down, I'm creating a straight line cork path. And that's what I worked on with my PVC pipe. Dropping the elbow, a little bit of straightening, a little bit of rest, and now I've got a straight line path. And you notice I'm stopping here. My stop is up here, it's not down here. Remember what that video was going over. I think that was comparing that to Marv's. Same thing, stopping high and coming down. So other common casting error, breaking the wrist on the forward cast. A lot of people, they in their cast, but then they do this all the way down here. And they may do it at the end, or they may break their wrist here. If you break your wrist early, you're going to shock the rod. And I see that a lot when people break their wrist on the back cast and start their forward cast with their wrist. And you'll see it creates a dip in there. And a very common reason to have a tailing loop. And how do you fix that same thing? You just watch that angle. Stop with 3 fingers. As you're coming down, 3 fingers, 3 fingers, 3 fingers, 2 fingers. This is all the wrists that we were doing, that we're teaching, just that amount. Fingers. Oh, 3 fingers. 3 fingers. 2 fingers with the wrist. The question was, where's the 3 fingers and 2 fingers? Yeah, that's my proprioceptive or feeling way of teaching that or understanding that is to stick my fingers in there. Right now, I'm having trouble with opening up my wrist when I start my forward cast. I'm casting like this with my practicing, trying to not open that up and putting that pressure on my fingers at staying at 3 and not opening up or not closing too early. So watching it or feeling it, but that angle is how we pay attention to what our wrist is doing. So why should you guys get help with your casting? Well, you want to have somebody teach you that knows what they're doing, and not just your next door neighbor who teaches you wrong, and then you got to come back and unlearn what you learn. So casting instructors, we're trained to teach. And when you can cast better, you can catch more fish. Some people talk about me, sometimes, especially lakes, out fishing. Everybody, a big part of that's because I can cast. Learn things from the beginning right, or fix it. When Learn how to deliver the fly accurately with the most efficient, least effort. Learn ways to compensate for health problems or injuries. If you have a bad shoulder, we can teach you how to work around that. For example, bad wrist. And just enjoy your fishing more. You know, you're untangling line because you have tailing loops or battling the wind. It's just not as enjoyable if you know how to compensate for it. How do you find an instructor? Fly Fishers International has a website. If you're not in this area or someone else, you can find a casting instructor. Local fly clubs can teach you, or fly shops. And then our fly club. We started Rivers West Casting Club. What our casting club does that we formed is we supply casting instructors for events on request. We did the August picnic clinic for the teaching. And we travel to Vancouver, and we'll be going up to Portland later this year. We host free casting instruction on Saturdays in West Salem at the West Salem boat launch down there at Wallace Marine Park. We do 9 o'clock spay casting on we say usually the gravel bar right now, it's the boat ramp. And then on the soccer field at 10:30 for single hand casting. Support candidates seeking FFI Casting Instructor Certification. We actually have a different get together for people that are working on that. There's like 4 or 5, sometimes 6 of us that get together and work to become instructors or better instructors. So casting instructor certification program, if you're interested in that, one of the goals of our club is to try to get every club to have 1 or more casting instructors, just to help everyone elevate their casting. This is through the Fly Fishers International. If you don't belong to the national organization, I highly encourage that you join that organization on top of joining the Fly Club. There's a lot of benefits to belonging to that. I belong to not only FFI National, but I belong to their tying group and the casting instructor group. And so we provide mentors sometimes to become a casting instructor. It's hard to find mentors. Our club has 3 masters, just a wealth of experience with the things that we can provide. So that's my talk. You guys have any questions? Yes. So the question is, we do elbow dropper. That's what we call ourselves, elbow droppers, if there are other methods. So the whole idea is to create a straight line tip path. And you need to have 2 joints working in unison to create a straight line path. If you just do elbow and no wrist or shoulder, you've got an arc. If you just do wrist, you've got an arc. If you just do shoulder, you've got an arc. If you do wrist and elbow without shoulder, you can do a straight line tip path. That's what I teach for my students who have a bad shoulder. So some people are able to do that correctly. There's a Lefty Cray method of casting. He uses body movement and elbow and wrist. He's very good caster, one of the best in the world. He doesn't do elbow dropping. This is more Joan Wolf style, so it's a style thing, but it's difficult if you're just doing elbow and wrist to create a straight line path without doming. So you can do it, but it's just not as easy. You have more power in your shoulder. When you drop your shoulder, your main power is coming from this big old muscle in the back called the latissimus dorsi. It's one of the biggest muscles in the body. A lot of power in this particular movement. This movement here, this is a triceps, much smaller muscle. You're not going to get as much power out of that. We talked about loading parts of the rod. You really need your shoulder to load the bottom of the rod and get the most power. The elbow alone will load the middle of the rod. Does that answer your question? To unlearn elbow straightening and go to elbow dropping is a lot of work, but it's totally worth it. Any other questions? Yes. So the question is, how do you deal with the wind? So this is so the wind comes in four different directions. It comes from, if I'm right-handed, it comes from my left to my right. No big deal, right? It's blowing away from you. Comes behind you, it's coming from behind you and moving forward. Well, that makes it easy to go forward, but now I've got to deal with my back cast. So wind's coming behind me, tight loop, wide loop. It's coming in front of me, wide loop, tight loop. Coming my right side, a couple different ways of dealing with it. I can do a sidearm, so I keep it away from me if the wind's not too bad. But the easiest way is to have the tip of my rod on the opposite side of my body. So it's over on my opposite shoulder, off shoulder cast. Yep, that's what Marco demonstrated, the off shoulder cast at one point. So the tip of my rod can be right here. I can even do it over here. It does change the cast. Mine is on the downwind throughout the entire cast. Okay. Well, if you're talking constant wind, or you're talking about a sudden gust. I kind of notice that it goes from zero wind to gust. It tends to go from low wind to gust, and so I just like to keep it on the downwind side of everything, the whole cast. You know, you don't have as much power usually with this until you get better at your casting. There's a lot of problems at Pyramid Lake, is to try to cast when it's coming the long way. You can also do your back cast delivery. And we do that a lot at Pyramid Lake, and that's a saltwater technique too. So, you know, that's part of what we learn when we become a casting instructor and what you have to know to become the gold level. Any other questions? Yes. I do. The question is, do I shoot one in the roll cast? No, not usually. Shot shoot line, that's kind of hard to do. And I prefer to work on my stop. That's what I've been working with the roll cast, is feeling the acceleration of power with the firm stop. And when I can get a nice full stop and a nice smooth application and with the firm stop, that's when I'm able to get my 55 foot cast on the roll cast. It took a while to get there. Um, Typically, I will start casting with about 30 feet of line and warm up. Casting instructor certification is generally done with 40 feet of line, and I've got it marked there. So I do a lot of my practicing with 40 feet. Now I'm starting to try to achieve master level. That's 50 feet of line. I'm probably going to take a 10% exception because of a wrist injury and work at 45. So I've got it marked there. So I worked my way up to 45 feet of line. Yeah, 2 years ago, I couldn't carry 50 feet of line without doing a haul. So that requires some skill to carry 50 feet of line without hauling. You got to work your way up to it. So I start off at 30 feet when I practice and work my way up. Yeah, rod length will affect that. It's much easier. My lake fishing rod is a 10-foot 6-weight. So I can cast much further. It's also a little harder on my wrist. I often cast it two-handed now since I have a wrist injury. My wrist injury was a cartilage tear, and I just have a wrap that comes and puts pressure in the fossa right here, and that tends to support it. But I'm teaching myself to cast left-handed and two-handed overhead casting to try to compensate for it. Any other questions? when I'm fishing, am I looking up? Often I do, actually. Often I do look up, what's my loop look like? Wear a hat and glasses. Big safety tip. Actually very important safety tip. Always wear a hat and glasses. And you'll notice that I've got room in the back of the hat because I can't tell you how many times I've done a tailing loop with a heavy fly and it sort of whacked me back here. And so if you have the room, it doesn't give you a concussion. Any other questions? Yes. The question is, if you've got, quite a bit of line, 45 feet, 50 feet, by the time it straightens, is the line on the ground? Actually, no, because as long as the loop is unrolling, there's an aerodynamic principle that keeps it aerialized. Once the loop is straight, that's when gravity takes it over. And there's this whole physics that involves, airplane wings and fly lines. But as it's unrolling, it's kept up straight, then it starts to drop. So if I'm starting to change my directions when it's the nail knot starting to come to the unrolling nose, then it's not dropping yet as I'm coming around. I'm waiting until I feel it, and that's around the time it's coming around the nose. You'll notice that the way Marco did his is he waited a little longer and things were kind of dropping. And that slows down his cast to need more of a trailing loop. Different style, it's perfectly valid. Sorry, was that? I don't. Bernoulli effect, a physics thing. I don't know, but if you go to, there's an article in the Casting Instructor Certification, The Loop, it's a journal, where one of the casting instructors worked with astrophysics PhD, why does the fly line not drop? And he signed one of his students to come up with it. And they came up with the formula on why fly lines stay in the air until they're straight. It was an interesting article. But it does go over that principle in that article. So the answer was there, if you've got a long amount of line right there, you've also got more momentum and speed. So another question? So the question is, if I'm fishing a spot, do I do things like changing the plane? There's a whole bunch of things that we consider from what we call mends. So we do different techniques to try to compensate. If I've got a stream that's moving fast here and slow here, I'll put a little reach mend in there, or I'll put a little curve in there, so that my fly has a more of a drag-free drift. Yes, sidearm casting it under trees, absolutely do that kind of thing. So lots of different changes that we can do in our delivery. The better you are at casting, less likely you are to get in the trees or bushes, or have a bunch of drag on your fly if you're on a stream, whatever. Well, you can still, with a basic cast, get it out there, but you've only got a drift of maybe a foot instead of 3 feet if you put a reach band in. Um, you can still get it out there if it's not too far out there. You're going to have some more tangles, but you'll spend more time dealing with untangling your flies and getting out of the trees, and it's just not as enjoyable. A lot of practice with that, untangling flies. Yes.
A reach band, you can work in a different current by putting in different bends into it. line as it's coming down, actually a greater distance instead of that fly, possibly a better zone, but you got one there. So if the basic ball, then really that basic match that rod. You actually get that greater distance that once it's falling.
But gracious with the fly rod, you're going to be placed on one area that no one can unscreen around stuff. Real conflict, ice and cream.
Yeah. So the thing was that the better you can, the farther distance that you can go, the more fish you can reach, going around boulders and stuff like that. I went to Alaska a few years ago, and when we were fishing with mice, and we were trying to cast, drop the cast right in front of a log. I mean, we wanted it 6 inches in front of the log so we can strip it along in front of there. And when you did it, and it drifted, and this big old rainbow came up and took it. You know, that was just awesome. You know, and if I lost the log, and the guide had to pull it off of there, or if I moved 3 feet upstream and splashed hard and scared the fish, it just not as fun. So I enjoy having a good casts. It really increases my enjoyment of the sport. Right way to do a double haul. You know, I could teach an entire 2-hour class in that. And the whole idea is to have your left hand drop at the same time that you're moving your line. So I'll do that here real quick. So, yeah, as you're coming down, you're hauling like that, and then coming back up at the end of the path. So I pull down as I'm doing the forward stroke, and I try to match the stop of my haul with the same time as the stop of the rod. And if you're doing the haul correctly, the momentum of the line will bring it back up. A haul can be a little twitch. The question is the haul a big dramatic movement? Depends on how much line you have out. If you don't have much line, you can just do a little, 3-inch haul. If you're trying to do saltwater fishing, you're trying to get out, 80 feet, your haul can be out here. So it's the timing. A smooth haul, stop the haul at the same time as you stop the rod, and then let it come back up with the momentum so you don't lose any slack. And the way Dwight teaches the haul is with a forward cast. He has the haul, well, the back cast, he has open the book. So we're going back cast, open the book. Forward cast, put it in your pocket. That makes sense. So double haul is pretty advanced technique, and you need to have a good back cast to make it work. So sometimes people will come up to us and say, teach me double haul, and we'll say, okay, show us your back cast. If it's part of the back cast, you're not going to be able to get this slip back up. So we need to work on that first. Any other questions? Yes. So the question is, if somebody comes on Fridays, is it free to ask for money or whatever? Saturdays, I'm sorry, we have another thing on Fridays too. That's different. That costs more money. We teach people for free the first few times. So far we've been free all the time. Right now we're talking about asking people if they're going to become regular to join our club. Pay the $30 a year fee, and be part of the club as being only fair. But we're sort of still working that out. What was that? Yeah, here you go.
Hey everybody, my name is Dave Friesdahl, member here. I'm the president of the casting club. I'm not an instructor yet. They asked somebody to organize, and hey Dave, so that's how I sort of got into it. But I'm on my journey, and it is a journey. Part of it is we do on Saturdays, it's free. Dwight has done this for what, 30 years down there?
20.
20? Okay, I added 10 to it. Especially when I show up. And so we're just, he's always done it for free, but part of what we're doing and why we're asking for either donations or if you've been down there about 4 or 5 times, we're going to ask you to join, is the goal of this club is it's not going to be we're going on outings to go fishing or something like this club does. It's really to be the educational arm of the Oregon Council of FFI. So we can actually go to all the other clubs throughout the state, which they're clubs at Klamath Falls, Newport, all the way down. And that's travel, it's time, from people volunteering. So part of the goal is we get donations, you join the clubs. One, you're going to get the instruction, which is great. It does improve. My journey so far has improved my casting and my fishing ability a ton. Just the different styles of things that I can do. But what we're doing is part of that is if we went to Roseburg for the veterans event they had this summer, and 3 of us went down for that to teach. And great reception, but part of that is paying for lunch, paying for fuel, trying to help out a little bit. Not everybody has a large amount of cash. The other part is develop casting instructors through the clubs. So they have somebody in their club like you have here that can help you. Just literally, the barbecue we had August, a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, just taking 20 minutes with each other and how well people improve. And we want to spread that. So this club's goal with the money is to not only help develop casting instructors, but also help defer some of those costs. So when we travel to the Central Coast or Klamath Falls, or we go to Vancouver, Washington, to help the Washington Council out with an event. Because we're actually the only, as we know right now, there's only 2 casting clubs on the whole West Coast. Okay, so you have Golden Gate, which is famous, right? World champions have come out of there, and now us. So we're starting out and trying to develop things. So any help you can help us would be great. We want to come down and watch you improve. It's fun to watch people just have aha moments. And the goal is just to really help out the Oregon Council and be that educational arm that right now is sort of missing in some aspects, just to make it fun. Enjoy yourself. Thanks.
So if anyone has any questions, come up to me afterwards. It's getting kind of late. So let's do the raffle. 5 minutes to do the raffle, and then we'll call it. Thank you. So last chance to buy raffle tickets. At 5 minutes, we'll give the raffle, and then we'll be done.